the term fascism has been raised. I always remember Lenny Bruce, the great American social critic and comic, did a bit about a woman yelling fascist at somebody in uniform and the object of her vitriol responding, "Fascist? Lady, I'm the mailman." And it came home to me when I read the Globe and Mail's coverage of the American election. Two talented and experienced journalists, Tabitha Southey, Doug Saunders, both used or implied the F word. I've read my history, writes Tabitha. Right now it feels as if I'm rereading one of the more unfortunate bits. Well done, America. I can report that we in Canada are feeling a little like Austria, 1933 right now. It's in the Globe and Mail, November 17th, same issue. Doug Saunders wrote, "But these white people have developed a set of beliefs that have led them to see a sort of strongman nationalist politics of ethnic exclusion as being perfectly acceptable. Only 2 generations after their country fought a war against that very thing." Once again, November 17th. They don't actually use the F word or the H word, but in terms of the dog whistle politics, as the term is used now, that they sometimes abhor, we know who and what they mean. Is it true? I don't think so. I was once a similar misuser of that term until I was confronted by real fascism. I was walking down the main street of the Providencia neighborhood of Santiago, Chile, where I lived at the time in '73, when I saw Jakarta written on a wall. And I said to the person with me, "What the hell is it? They're opening an Indonesian restaurant?" And then a little further on the same wall, I saw it again, this time with the swastika-like slogan of Patria y Libertad, the incipient fascist organization, and a shiver literally went down my spine. I thought, that's the agenda. The agenda is not to defeat the left in the congressional elections, it's about mass murder. This being 8 years after the massacre of the Indonesian Communist Party in 1965, which saw somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people killed. The Communist Party called Franklin Roosevelt the fascist candidate in the 1932 elections, and Norman Thomas, the Socialist Party candidate, was the social fascist candidate, this being the parlance of the day. Meanwhile, in the same year, they said that Hitler was a passing phenomenon, which would be followed by a proletarian revolution in Germany. The left has been wrong about fascism much more than it has been right. Fascism is not only about right-wing politics. It's about violence. It is about more than the worship of a strong leader and virulent nationalism. That can be Bonapartism. That can be a straightforward military dictatorship. Fascism is unique and the most extreme form of bourgeois rule because the bourgeoisie gives up some of its ability to rule in exchange for the shock troops needed for an all-out offensive against the working class and its organizations, suspending any kind of pretense of bourgeois democracy. We've seen many fascist organizations, but only a very few fascist regimes, despite the use and misuse of the term. Today's far right, from populist to fascist, is operating in a different context with a different program, and nowhere has the bourgeoisie, the 1%, decided it needs a fascist solution. Those are not the tactics to be employed against a right-wing organization. They can be defeated in elections by force of argument, as we have seen, and do not require an armed response. fascism has come to power or become an influence on the political life of a country when the left has abdicated its role, either to fight fascism in the only way that is effective, in the street, or to take advantage of a revolutionary crisis by taking power. That was true in Italy, Germany, Austria, Spain, Hungary, and a variety of other places. Italian fascism was the result of the failure of the left to follow through after the occupations of the factories in Turin in 1920. In September of 1920, the industrial proletariat was in control of the key areas of Italian society. Peasant organizations were rising up, and nothing happened. The Socialist Party didn't know what to do. They were afraid to take power. The Communist Party had not really yet been created. In Bologna, 2 months later, November 21st, 1920, the Social Democrats, the Socialist Party, won the elections, the municipal elections, and emerged from City Hall to make the announcement and introduce the new mayor. A fascist gang opened fire, killed 10, wounded 100. That was the beginning of a fascist terror as the black shirts attacked trade unions, attacked peasant leaders, etc. This is not small stuff. This is what fascism does. It is an armed movement that uses extreme violence against the left. And we need to be careful not to denounce the mailman when we're looking at something that is different. It took 2 years before Mussolini would come to power. In Germany, we saw the same kind of thing, where the left, even though in the last so-called free elections in the fall of 1932, the Nazi vote declined by 2 million. They had 33% of the vote. The Communist and Socialist parties between them had 37%. And yet, von Papen could name Hitler chancellor, and the left sat there. They sat on their hands and waited until they were massacred. Trotsky, again, wrote, "Fascism is a razor in the hands of the class enemy." Does this look like anything we see today? I don't think so. I think what we are seeing today in North America and Europe, I don't have time to go into Asia, where you have attacks by Buddhists on Muslims and Hindus, etc., 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 everywhere from Myanmar to Sri Lanka, and I don't have time to talk about Pakistan or Afghanistan, where you have neo-fascist or fascist organizations, or Latin America. But in Europe and North America, I think what we are dealing with is a populist movement. I can appreciate that being harassed and attacked by yabos from a far-right populist gang is hard to distinguish from the same treatment from a fascist gang. Still, there is a difference. There are fascist organizations out there, but they are small and, with few exceptions, isolated from any claim to any significant support. The murder of Joe Cox, the Labour MP in England during the debate on Europe, was carried out by somebody with a history on the far right, but not by a fascist organization. We have not yet seen a significant sector of big capital supporting fascist organizations. There may be the odd eccentric millionaire or billionaire, but not a significant section of the ruling class anywhere. That is what is different from the rise of fascism in the 20s and 30s. The big bourgeoisie is not interested. By and large, the main political project of the contemporary far right, in fact, is anti-globalism. And what is the main project of big capital? Globalism. There's a problem there. There's a little bit of a problem that the big bourgeoisie is not interested in the populist demagoguery of Trump or Farage in England, etc. Virulent nationalism, misogyny, anti-immigrant rhetoric, restriction on women's rights to control their bodies, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism of various hues. All this finds a home to one degree or another in the parties of the European and North American far right. But it is nationalism that is the main feature that all these parties share. You can have an extreme party of the Catholic right in Poland and a contender for power led by a gay politician who boasts about seducing Muslim men in Holland. What do they share? Nationalism, virulent nationalism. Big capital can live with the demagoguery as long as it doesn't affect profits. In apartheid South Africa, Chinese were colored and Japanese were white. This reflected the economic weight of each individual country in the 80s. Trump wants to bring jobs home to America. We'll see how many British and Canadian university professors and information technology specialists will lose theirs. Deporting Mexicans with criminal records is one thing. Attacking the folks who produce profits is another. The same question is posed in Europe. We'll see if the British will deport the French and vice versa if the Brexit actually comes to pass. In Canada, we remember, a regime that toyed with some of the ideas of the far right, and it was the Sri Lankans who were victimized until the Conservative Party, realizing that blocking with socially conservative ethnic organizations of color was a profitable endeavor, and Jason Kennedy went off to do so, with pretty good results, but not good enough. Today's far right has more of the classic demagoguery, attacking the betrayal of the workers by the capitalists who betray the nation as they export jobs to look for greater profits elsewhere. The cosign of this is a hatred of immigrants, those who might do a job cheaper abroad, but who are here and ready to take yours for a fraction of what you would work for. This is a different kettle of fish. Along with the latter is the implied critique of multiculturalism in the form of the campaign against the hijab, but all three of these areas of contagion are more prevalent south of the border than in Canada, where the real fascists are hunkering down for the apocalypse with their guns, ammo, and rations, dodging the black helicopters the UN is using to track them, i.e., they're pretty nutty right now. One thing that does stand out, however, it's the fact that the popular right shares some major concerns with the left, and I'm going to end with this idea. In fact, the anti-globalism that is a common plank of the far right is shared in most ways by the left. Trump came to power by tapping into working class anger at capitalist injustice, the very thing the left was built on, not an enraged petty bourgeoisie that is the basis for fascism. We share some fundamental goals with Trump, just as our comrades in Britain shared some territory with the Brexit campaign. Opposition to NAFTA, many of us are old enough to remember, was a major campaign of the left. We fought against the TPP as if it was going to be original sin. We should be delighted now that the TPP is going to be murdered, but we aren't. The far right is present and has taken up the challenge that the left has mainly failed to meet. The question is posed, how does the left separate itself from neoliberalism and replace capitalist globalization and right-wing chauvinism with, to coin a phrase, proletarian internationalism? Is there a party that has a program for this? If not, how can we build one?